Okay, just doing the initial test so that we can put the recording in. Welcome to the lesson on apostrophes. This is not a long or complicated lesson, but there are a few tricky points where apostrophes can cause some problems. So we'll go over the rules and look at some examples of how to correctly use apostrophes. So first of all, an apostrophe is a punctuation mark that is used to make a word possessive or to indicate a contraction. So we'll take these in turn. First, to indicate possession. So we have some examples here. Bob's company, Sally's bagels. The company belongs to Bob. The bagels belong to Sally. And then below, Tess's beauty salon, the student's book, Ross's new car. Notice here that Tess and Ross, even though they end in S, it's still apostrophe S. You don't just slap an apostrophe on the end. That's a common mistake, to think that just because something ends in S, you just do an apostrophe and not an S. If it's a singular noun, even if it ends in S, you'll still put apostrophe S. But to show possession for a plural noun, a plural word that ends in S, just add an apostrophe. That's when you just add the apostrophe. So for example, the student's books, there's multiple students there. The movie star's autographs, multiple movie stars. So those are plural words. They end in S. So in that case, you just put the apostrophe on the end. So it's really the difference between not whether it ends in S or not so much, but whether it's plural or singular. Okay, so to indicate a contraction. And there's nothing very tricky about this. Most people are familiar with how an apostrophe works this way. These words are contracted from two words. Can't is contraction of cannot. Doesn't is a contraction of does not. Okay, to avoid confusion, sometimes a writer will use an apostrophe, especially when referring to a word as a word in a text. So to avoid suggesting that that word is a plural form, an apostrophe can be used. It's not very common, but it's worth mentioning. So an example would be, when proofreading the essay, I found too many that's and howevers. The words that were found were that and however, but to show that multiple ones were used, an apostrophe is used here so it doesn't give the impression that the words that were found were literally plural that's and howevers. It's worth talking about when not to use an apostrophe, because sometimes this can cause confusion. So you don't use an apostrophe to create a plural. Instead, to create plurals, you just add S or ES, as the case may be. So the 1960s, my pencils, 10 DVDs. It might be tempting to put an apostrophe in there, but it's not necessary. Just add the S to indicate it's plural. And you do not add an apostrophe to verbs. For some reason, errors commonly occur with the word sees and says. So she sees her faults. That does not require an apostrophe. He says he's a nice guy. Says does not require an apostrophe there. He's does, because that's a contraction of he is. And do not add an apostrophe to possessive pronouns. So these words are already indicate possession. That's what they do. That's their whole purpose for being. They are not made possessive by adding an apostrophe. So an apostrophe is not necessary. This most commonly occurs with the one in the middle there, its. So its is the possessive pronoun that indicates possession. It apostrophe s is a contraction of it is. So let's look at an example here and see if you can tell whether or not it's used correctly in these sentences. The dog hates its leash, is trying to chew it off. So in the first case there, we have the apostrophe. It might be tempting to put that apostrophe in there because we think, oh, it's leash, it's possessive, and that's what apostrophes do. But no, not in this case. Its is a possessive word by nature already. In the second sentence, its, that really is trying to be a contraction of it is. It is trying to chew it off. So the correct answer is just the opposite of how it's written here. Okay, the correct form is the dog hates its leash, possessive pronoun, no apostrophe, and its, a contraction of it is trying to chew it off. Okay, so that's the lesson on apostrophes. Not a lot of difficult concepts to understand here, but it's definitely worth practicing in the exercises just to make sure you have a feel for how it works.